On this week's show, Finding Your Midlife Mojo. This week, I'm speaking to Ali Spooner. She's 47. She spent 18 years at Procter & Gamble, excelling but struggling with imposter syndrome and people-pleasing. In her mid-30s, bullying and burnout led to 6 months of recovery and career uncertainty. Over the next 10 years, she navigated roles in sales, customer services, charity work and recruitment, often feeling lost. During COVID, she discovered coaching, which she says has been her calling. She now specializes in helping people, mostly women, regain their midlife mojo, guiding them through career transitions, confidence building, and self-discovery. So today, I'm hoping Ali is going to be able to help us when we lose that midlife mojo. Welcome to the show, Ali.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here.
Fantastic. So, mojo, I love that word in the first place, but what appealed to you about coaching and specifically this midlife coaching? How did you get into it? What do you love?
Coaching is something that I think has always been a part of who I am. I've always been, the person that people go to speak to, that, people feel safe with. And funnily enough, when I was in my old roles, I always felt less than because I was, master's nice. So it feels like I'm coming back full circle and becoming the person I was always meant to be and just using the skills that I have naturally and where I feel at my best to help other people. And I think that having coaching myself and realising the change and the impact that actually had on me was so huge. It was so life-changing that I was like, that's what I want to do. And I think that realisation was a massive turning point in my life. And now I feel like I'm the person I was always meant to be, and it's just been fantastic.
Losing your mojo at any time is not particularly pleasant, but I'm finding in midlife, if we lose that mojo, it can really stop us maybe moving on and being maybe our better selves. What does it look like when you lose your mojo? What are the warning signs that sort of feeling stuck?
It's a real feeling of, you wake up in the morning and you think, who am I? I don't really recognise the person that is looking back at me. I don't really know what I enjoy anymore. I don't know what I like. It can be a feeling of feeling sort of trapped, feeling like you don't really belong anywhere, that everything just feels hard. It can feel like you're disconnected. It can even feel like boredom. You can feel really, really bored with life. And just this sort of a general sense of feeling disconnected from yourself and actually other people around you.
What is it that, from your experience, that you've found by talking to others, where does that come from?
So it's an interesting question. And I think that, we've all heard the term midlife crisis, right? Somebody goes out and buys a Porsche, or people have affairs or whatever it is. But what happens in midlife is that you're not the person that you were. So you're not that 20-something person, and you're not necessarily the person that you are going to be. So you're in this kind of middle betwixt stage, and there's actually a name for it, which is called liminality. And in this stage, it's like a disconnection from yourself and a sort of a lack of understanding in who you are. And that can cause a lot of these feelings to come up because we're trying to live like a 20-something, and that's not who we are anymore. And not understanding ourselves well enough means that we don't actually know who we're trying to become. And there's a real sense of like tension and friction there for us. So I think that's where the feelings build from. It's a real lack of self-awareness, but that's not our fault. It's a natural space for us to be in.
I guess that comes in for different people at different times, does it? Or there's nothing particularly that triggers it. It's just your natural way you are. There'll be a point where that will happen.
It could be a sort of a natural phase that you go through. There is actually some research that suggests that sort of moving into midlife can be as big a change as moving from adolescence to adulthood, and that's a big step. So you can't kind of discount what a big step this is. However, if you're talking about sort of the midlife crisis element of it, that is actually triggered by a profound sense of loss. I think it was Julie Hanan that said that. And that loss can be the loss of something that you've invested time, energy, or money in. So it could be, the loss of a parent or a loved one. It could be the fact that your children are leaving home and going to university or building their own lives. It could be the loss of your identity at work. You don't really feel like the role you're living in is the role that, used to make you happy. It could be, you're noticing that your skin is aging and there's sort of a loss of looks there. And there are lots of things that happen to us, and that sense of loss can have a really profound effect on us.
So do some people cope with that better than others? Do some people just embrace that, or does it tend to hit most people at some point from your experience?
I think for those people who really know themselves and who spend the time understanding who they are throughout their lives, they probably won't experience it to the same level because they already know who they are and what they like, and they're changing as they go. But I think people who spend a lot of time, for example, women, if they become mothers and carers and then their children leave home, that role, that loss can really impact them. If somebody has had the same career all their life and suddenly they're made redundant, that is a profound loss. And they're thinking, well, what do I do now? Who am I? If you have a health concern or something that comes up that stops you from doing something you love and you can't do that hobby or whatever it is anymore, that can have a thing. So I think it's very dependent on who you are and how you actually live your life and sort of how inward you are.
Where does confidence come into this?
With confidence comes an element of self-awareness, like you know who you are and you're not relying on other people's feedback to feel good about yourself. Maybe you don't care what you look like, or maybe you know exactly how to dress to make you feel confident. Maybe it's about not being fearful of change. So there's sort of lots of different ways that you can be confident. And I think that if you are confident in yourself and you are looking more outwardly and you're not scared about taking action, then potentially this stage could be easier because you will not move through this stage unless you take action. Because otherwise you're sat in that space that we talked about before, which is all about the fear state and like the stuckness of it all.
Yeah, that's interesting. How do men and women cope with this period slightly differently? I'm talking about, do they lose their mojo differently?
That's really interesting because I've heard all sorts of things where only women have a midlife crisis because it's to do with the menopause, or it's only men that have the midlife crisis. They go out and buy themselves a Porsche or Ferrari. And I would say that's rubbish. Aging is a gift, right? And if we are lucky enough to age and we get to this point, then we are going to go through this sort of midlife space. So you've got men with like this masculine energy, right? So they have naturally been maybe the provider, and this is obviously going on old stereotypes, but the provider, the person that goes out, gets the money, they come home, and maybe the woman has been the primary caregiver, the nurturer. So when midlife hits, quite often you see men who go from sort of the masculine energy and they head much more towards the feminine. They want to let go a bit and let go of that toxic masculine kind of ideology, if you like, and they want to be more in their feelings and more emotional, and I want to do what I love. And women who've been in that feminine space can move into the more masculine and think, well, actually, maybe I've missed out because I took this period out of my life to be the caregiver and the nurturer. And now, quite frankly, I want to go for it. So the energies can kind of do a swap. Now, that isn't true of everybody. It feels like a generalized statement, but I do see that, and I do hear that happens, that kind of change.
If that happens and you're married or in a couple, I guess, communication, has got to be quite key here, hasn't it? Because if you've got these two kind of shifting people or personalities with wants, desires, acknowledging who you were and where you want to be going, I guess communication must play a big part in that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's any surprise that divorce rates are highest in midlife. And I think, people are changing. I think sometimes people sort of think, oh, my partner's really changed. They're not the person they were, but they forget that actually they're not the person they were either. So that whole point around communication is actually really, really important, because you can grow together. But as long as you talk about it, there's lots of stuff on that. And I'm not a relationship expert, but I do believe that communication really here is key, because if you understand and you can talk about how you're feeling and what's going on for you and empathize and work with each other and what's going on and what the changes are, then you're more likely to ride that wave.
How do we differentiate between or distinguish between, I guess, a temporary dip in motivation and mojo and something that maybe requires a bit more looking into and a bit more, maybe there's a bit more here? Because we can all feel a bit off, can't we, at times, and a bit, but are there any particular signs that you've noticed through your coaching that you think it's more than just an off day?
But like I said before, is that change comes with action. And I think when people are feeling relatively confident, but they've had a bit of a dip, they can still see a way forward and they can still kind of take the steps. I think when people are really stuck, there can be this feeling of they're going around in circles. There's a lot of limiting beliefs that come up, like, oh, I can't do that, or I should do that, and there are lots of like little words that they might use, which kind of keep them in that space. And that's not their fault. I think when people are in this negative space, it can feel really scary, right? It can feel really, really scary to put yourself out there and to change, because change can be big and it can feel big. And a lot of people, I think, are really scared of change because they're scared of what might happen or making it worse, or, what if I do it wrong? So they're happier to stay where it isn't right, but where it's safe. It isn't safe, but where they feel like it's safe because they know it.
They know it,
Then they are to actually move through it and kind of make that progress. And that's my job, is to try and help people to move in a safe space to kind of, what are the steps we need to take to kind of change things, and what do you need and what do you want,
I suppose it comes back to that confidence as well a little bit, doesn't it? Because if you're confident in yourself and you have that self-belief, then you probably have the self-belief to think, I can make the change because I'll be okay. I'll work through it. Interesting. Yeah. So do you find that sort of loss of mojo is different with high achievers, maybe who have sort of ticked all the boxes and done everything they've wanted to those who feel like they haven't quite found their path? Does that play into it at all?
I think there is something in that, because I think with success comes this sort of sense that on paper, everything looks perfect, right? I've got the big job, I've got the great car, I've got the big house, my kids go to private school, whatever your big success might look like. And if you've got all this stuff and people are looking at you going, wow, they've got everything, aren't they lucky? And you're sat there thinking, but I'm so miserable, I'm not happy, I'm not fulfilled, I feel anxious going to work, I'm, shouting at the kids, my husband doesn't like me anymore. Do you know, it's like all this stuff can happen. So you can be as successful as you like outwardly, but actually inwardly, if you're not happy, then there can be a real sense of kind of guilt and feelings of failure around that. Like, why aren't I happy? I should just get on with this. So I think there's that, which can be quite difficult. And I think with the other one, it's a bit of a loss of dreams. So if you have given up a period of your life to do something else, or to do a job that you don't like, to be a caregiver, whatever it might be, lots of people give up their dreams without realizing it. And then they suddenly think, oh my gosh, I've done all this stuff. Where did my life go? And why have I not done what I wanted to achieve? And that can give you real feelings again of failure and loss. And wherever you are in your life, it all kind of comes back to, how are you feeling inside? And are you putting yourself first or not? Have you put yourself first or not?
Yeah. We know that talking is good. On the whole. It's good. And I know that from my own personal journey so far, with speaking to lots of different people about different experiences, it's sort of heartwarming to feel that I'm not the only one trying to work out what I'm doing and where I'm going. Having that conversation, can that help that mojo shift?
Yeah, I think so. like communication and connection are really important, right? We're human beings. We need that in our lives. But I feel like there is an element of shame and guilt that comes with feeling like I should have it all figured out by now. Or why am I unhappy? Or everything is fine on paper, but it just doesn't feel right. You know, all of these feelings that we feel, or I'm stuck, I'm a professional, I should be able to get myself out of this, or, you know, all the things that people tell us, just get on with it, you know. How
It's funny
hard can it
because
be?
I've I've had to pivot and shift and navigate different parts of my life because I've been self-employed since about 21. So what you've just said really resonates because I've had to do that. And therefore, the position I'm in at the moment is I'm feeling I've had to do that in the past before and I've sort of managed to do it. So why can't I do it now? And it's like I feel like I should be able to. So what you're saying is that's quite common for people to feel like, you know, they're in professional jobs, they've got certain roles, they should be able to make the change, but they just can't.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important for people to know that they're not alone. So, you know, I create content and I write blogs and things. And the base of that is to kind of help people understand that they're not alone. And it's really interesting that I've actually had people send me direct messages on my LinkedIn when I've created posts and said, this really resonates with me, thank you. And I didn't expect that, but they do. And I think that the importance of knowing you're not alone, you're not the only person that's feeling this, can be of a real comfort, and it can help you shift from thinking, what am I doing wrong, to, oh, okay. And it can let you take a bit of a breath, I think.
Are these conversations happening more now, do you think, than what they may have done 10 or 15 years ago? Now, I appreciate that's before you sort of moved into this space. Do you think it's happening more now? And how does society and the expectations that we put on ourselves and social media and everything else, how much of that is playing into us, forcing us into this lack of mojo?
I would say that maybe the generation, like my parents' generation and their parents' generation, would have been like, classic, stiff upper lip, just button up your shirt, sit down, take it like a man, which I hate that phrase, but, you know, like, just get on with it. You know, just do it. We've all done it. We've done it. My mother did it. My father did it. My grandparents did it. Just get on with it. And I think that isn't very healthy, but that kind of goes through, you know, the generations. And I do feel like we're living in a space now where everything is more open. It's more open to challenge. And social media has its negative places, obviously. But I do think what it has opened up is the conversation. The same with midlife. I feel like we're actually openly talking about it and saying, this is a space. And let's not forget that in the last 100 years, through sort of science and medicine, our sort of lifespans have doubled. So, you know, when we hit midlife, we've still got half of life to go. You know, we're not done. And I think there are all these old narratives that tell us when you hit midlife, you ought to go and, you know, buy a pipe, sit in a chair and start snoozing. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I like a snooze, right? But it's, I think this is kind of the start of the next chapter, and midlife can be really, really exciting. I mean, I'm in midlife now, and a few years ago, I probably would have thought, oh God, this is nearly over. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, how lucky am I? It is a privilege and it's exciting. And we need to be able to shout that and allow people to kind of feel like this is a space that they can move into that can be, it's not going to be what they were, but it can be something new and like fulfilling.
I guess because you have found, let me say, a renewed sense of purpose, then that is the key probably, because, you know, if you have that sense of purpose and passion for something, then absolutely, I can see midlife is no barrier at all. Crack on. But I suppose it's if you're in doubt about your position, what you're doing and where you sit now, that's the difficulty, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Would you say that to be the case with some of the clients that you've met, that they are people that have maybe come to the end of their first act in their career and acknowledging the fact that actually, no, I am done with that now, actually, and that's okay. It served me well, looked after me, but now I need something else. But because they don't know where to go, that's where that deflation comes and that lack of oomph for life.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of comes back to what is important to me now, and is it the same or isn't it the same? And it's unlikely to be the same as what I was. And there's this thing where you can sort of say that, for the first part of our lives, we are fitting into the world. And for the second part, we want the world to fit to us, right? We're kind of, there's a bit of a transition there. So maybe you've spent the first half of your life creating a career and like having things that make you feel joyful, and your values are around achievement, money, success, whatever it might be. That might not be the case, but then you might get to midlife and think, oh, actually, now it's much more about, I don't know, giving back, finding freedom in life rather than having to sit in a cube all day. And, and I know working from home and all these things are changing, but a lot of the people I speak to want a bit more freedom. So there are these changes in what is important to us, what we actually believe to be possible, and also, I guess, the idea that maybe the next dream is possible, that maybe what they thought they'd let go hasn't necessarily had to be let go.
Yeah. So let's dig into that then a bit. I've lost my mojo, okay? I come and see you and I don't know whether I'm coming or going. Just talk me through that process that you look into when you're looking at your clients, and to help me understand the kinds of things I need to understand about myself to maybe shift from coming out of that slump to feeling much more positive. So just sort of kind of take me through the steps of what we should be doing.
So when I start with a new client, there are things that I will always cover at the beginning. And I started doing it because it felt important to me as a coach. And I was like, I feel like these things are important. I just naturally felt an affinity. But what I've realised is this actually really works. And sometimes your clients, are a bit like, why am I doing this? Just stick with me here. So one of the first things I do is ask them to go through a process where we talk about, I call it me at my best. So what am I doing? Who am I working with? That kind of thing. There's lots of questions we can ask around. When you're at your best, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Who are you with? Where were you? So that people can kind of get a real insight into, oh gosh, yeah, when I did that job or when I did that holiday or whatever it was, I was I was really myself. It really flowed. Time went by really, really quickly. All of these things really, really worked. And we don't spend enough time looking at that kind of stuff. We just do the day-to-day and we get through it. And actually, when you're trying to pinpoint, when am I or have I been at my best and why? So that is the first thing that I look at. The second thing I tend to look at then is values. So values in midlife is one of the most important things, because you have changed and a lot of people are still trying to live to the values that they had because they feel like, oh, well, they're my values. They can't change. You're like, they can change. You might have some that are the absolute crux of who you are that will always be there, but other ones will come and go and become more or less important to you. So we work on values, and the importance of values is to sort of understand your top 3 or 5, because what that helps you to do is when you're feeling disconnected, quite often you can understand why you're disconnected, because you'll be like, oh, my value of, I don't know, connection, whereas I'm not talking to anybody all day at work and I'm feeling a bit sad, because I haven't got that connection, and you haven't recognized that. Or a value of fairness, and I'm seeing that there's lots of redundancies happening and that doesn't really sit very well with me, but I don't understand the process. So all of these things kind of help you to identify what drives you and what's important to you, but equally the opposite is true. So we also look at the positive opposite. So what's happening in your life that doesn't fit with that and why? And then we sort of move through strengths, what gives you energy, what drains you, how much of your time is being spent doing tasks that actually energize and make you feel joyful versus how much of your time is spent doing, the other stuff. So there's lots of things that we do, but, as we go, they're the sorts of things that we will talk through.
One Once you start to explore this with your clients, does it make sense to them? And it's like being staring at them all the time, and it's just that it's needed someone else to, I suppose, shine the light, I suppose.
It's really interesting because I feel like most of your clients will have a light bulb moment. Sometimes that light bulb moment is, oh my God, I didn't know that. But sometimes the light bulb moment is, oh my gosh, of course, like that's so obvious. So you can have both, but most of the time people will be like, oh, okay, that makes so much sense. And it's really lovely because you can see it happen. And quite often they do what I just did, which is like sit back in their chair and just be like, oh, okay. Suddenly everything makes sense. And,
So I suppose there's one thing then, having that light bulb moment and then thinking, okay, I get it. Now I've got to do something. Now I've acknowledged it. I've got to still make a change, haven't I? Is it a slow process, or can it change overnight? Or is it a case of just need to be disciplined, need to acknowledge X or Y and just move through that and be patient? Just talk me through how long these things can take once you've had that light bulb moment.
Or how long is a piece of string, as my mum always used to say. I would say it very much depends on the individual. So it depends in what space they're in, what their starting point has been, how far down the rabbit hole they've got, So I will always try and work with people to, I sort of say pulling the threads. Like you start talking about something, then you start trying to pull the thread on the whys and the hows and the whats. And then sort of moving through to actions. And actions can feel really challenging because suddenly you're asking people to face what they've just realised. And realising something can be difficult, right? You can suddenly be like, oh, I'm not comfortable with that. Or actually, that's amazing. But when you ask people to start thinking about what they need to change or how they're going to move through this, that can be really uncomfortable or it can be really exciting. So firstly, it depends on where the person is. And as a coach, my job is to meet them where they are and help them navigate that process. It is all about working with your client, working with what they need. But also my job as a coach is to challenge when we think it's necessary. So if we feel like somebody isn't acknowledging or is kind of going around the process and not really getting in there, then we will also kind of contract to be, let me just reflect this back at you. This is what you've said. And then the other thing is that quite often people will say something, but their body language shows something else. And that is a really good giveaway. And sometimes you're like, I hear that you're saying this. So they might say, oh, I know I need to do X, Y, or Z. And they're sat there going, or their shoulders are or they've got tensed up and and it's noticing, what's going on and working with the client.
Are there any sort of common patterns that you see there in terms of the people that can do that and those that maybe continue to struggle?
I think people who struggle, it's probably down to the fact that they need more space and more time for thinking and sort of feeling their way through what the actions actually mean and what impact it's going to have on them and those around them. It's client dependent, but I think there are different ways that people will grow on it.
How would you sort of sum up that it's normal to lose a little bit of midlife mojo, but it doesn't have to be that way?
So I would say accept, acknowledge where you are, acknowledge that things might feel hard and that things might not be how you want them to be. I think that's the first thing. Second thing is know you're not alone. There is no shame in feeling how you feel. I would say thirdly, sort of embrace curiosity about yourself. Challenge yourself to ask people around you what they see and how they might be able to help. And also be curious about whether a coach or, somebody could actually help you move through it, whoever that might be. I think the other thing is surround yourself with great people. Surround yourself with people who really spark your energy and who are like cheerleaders, and move yourself away from the people that, drain you. If people aren't on your side and they're not going to go with you, really question that. And I think one of the hardest things to say is it's your responsibility. And that can feel really, really difficult to hear. That doesn't mean to say no one's there to help. We are here to help, but you need to make the decision to make the change and to move forward and to get through it. And if you do, you absolutely won't be disappointed. It's like if you can recognize what's happening, if you can take action, whatever action looks like to you. So that might be speaking to your friends, that might be connecting with people, that might be speaking to a coach or a therapist, somebody that's going to actually help you move through it. Then on the other side, when you've done the work and you've got your self-awareness and you know who you are and you can connect back to who you truly are now, and now is a really important word. Who am I today? And connect back to what's important to you now. On the other side, there is magic.
You have done that. You have moved from a career that did you very well, but maybe not so good in certain areas. You've now come out the other side. You've rediscovered yourself. You've found your second act. What would you say personally that you have gained from your journey?
Wow. So much. And it's stuff that I would never have thought was possible. I was always quite a quiet child. I've always sort of kept myself to myself, been nice. I kind of said yes to everything because I felt like saying no was a disservice to other people and I was letting other people down. I didn't use my voice. I didn't get cross. You know, there are lots of things that I wasn't. I made myself quite small. And then I started to believe that narrative and believe that Ali was small and quiet and was never going to like reach the top. And, you know, I had these dreams, but they weren't going to happen for me. And you know what? That's okay. You know, everybody else is happy. I'm good. You know, and I kind of sat in that space and I genuinely believed that that was okay until I found that it wasn't. And when I started doing the work and I had coaching and I had 2 different coaches, career coaching and more personal coaching. And I also did a women's retreat, which was, again, life-changing, and it was so life-affirming. And what I've learned is that I had put myself on hold. It was like I put myself into the freezer. I was like just stuck in this weird, I don't know, time zone where I was, you know, in this weird, like, I'm not really going forwards, I'm not really going backwards, and that's kind of okay. And then when the changes started to happen, I realised I had more confidence in myself and my choices and more confidence to make decisions. I never thought I'd be a business owner. I was like, that is not happening for me. No way. That is far too scary. And look where I am now, business owner. I would never afford colour. I literally surrounded myself in beige, black, navy. And it was one of my very good friends who actually said, have your colours done? Changed my life. I kid you not. I'm like, oh no, look at me in my purple and red. But it's given me more confidence. You know, I can go out and talk to people about things that I'm passionate about. I would have second guessed myself before, whereas now it's like, no, this is what I believe in. This is important to me. So I'm more passionate. I feel like I've got more to give. I feel like I'm a better mother, a better partner, you know, all of these things. And it feels like it's come together and I've got so much more joy for life. Like, I really genuinely feel like I am now the person I was always meant to be, but I had to work out who that was, you know, and I had to get to a point of being like, oh, I need to figure out who I am. And here I am. So I think it's amazing. And I never thought I would say that. I mean, look at me on a podcast. So,
well, look, fantastic. You found the magic on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ali, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been absolutely joyful. Thank you.